Let's bring in our guest who's in the studio now. Former Deputy Speaker of the National Assembly, Farah Maalim. Good to have you in the studio again. Karibu sana.
Thank you.
This is the hot seat, and now we have a DJ's deck right in front of you. So at the end of this, you'll do one or two mixes.
Spin a few tunes.
Yes. Mheshimiwa Maalim, it's good to have you in the studio again.
Thank you.
We've asked you to join us so we can have this conversation. You have experience as a member of parliament, and you have experience as a leader in the parliament, as a former deputy speaker. When we see the members of parliament today speaking as loudly as they are speaking about the rising cost of living, because fuel prices have gone up, and then we are going to have, excise duty also going up, and that will take the fuel prices even higher up. From where you sit, do you feel as if they are genuine in their concerns and their complaints? Or are they also really shocked? Or are they just shedding crocodile tears?
There are a number of ministries that they do their own regulations, what you call subsidiary legislations, without necessarily having to come back to the plenary of the parliament. And Treasury is one of them. The other one is Ministry of Health, which can come up with all drafts of what you call subsidiary legislation, which is law by day, without necessarily going back to parliament to get that green light. So for taxes purposes, the Treasury has that what you call leeway. But be that as it may, as the law is there, and they have that free hand. What normally happens, and I'm talking about so-called public participation. I heard you initially talk about public participation. Public participation is now provided for in our legislative system process, and for that to happen, the quantum or the level of public participation is directly proportional to the amount of civil society activities that's there and the role that's played by the media. You see what I mean? Those two roles. It has to be permanently in the psyche of the people and the masses for them to pick up this and say, there is this legislation coming up, so that outcries are there, demonstrations are there, participations are there, and the media is there. The media is there, having taken a full, cognizance of that right from the beginning. Now, the NGO fraternity, the non-governmental organization fraternity, will only go for what is, at that time, a bit explosive. They go for sensational things. The media goes for sensational things. So there's a failure both on the part of the media. As it's done, we do not have to reinvent the wheel again. This happens globally. Whenever a new legislation is coming up, you have a duty and responsibility to get in touch with the best experts in every area, put in your own media dimension into these things, and bring out the multifaceted dimensions to what is likely going to be the end result. And that also has got to happen with the civil society. Now that doesn't happen. There is very little knowledge. There is very little narratives that comes out at that initial stage. But later on, when it becomes, now is the crunch, and people are feeling in their own pockets, and the ordinary person is suffering. Politicians need the votes out there. This is an election year for information. Politicians need their votes. The media also wants to have these sensations. You have, front headlines.
So, Farah, are you saying essentially that
it's a failure on many areas?
Okay.
It's not a failure that you can only put on the door of just one out of the many.
But allow me
actors.
to put it on the door of members of parliament, at least for a few moments right now. Then we can open this up just a little bit, Farah. So we hear the speaker yesterday even saying at this point, look here, Kenyans are crying we cannot have members of parliament crying as well, because you had an opportunity to change the course of things and you didn't. So at that point, what would your thinking be, whereby you were sitting in debate and you had an opportunity to change the course, or at least motion the course of things in a particular direction, and you did not? Why does that happen?
You see, like I told you from the beginning, I want you to internalize this and understand it. Let's be on the same page. There are certain ministries, certain areas in which you don't have to come back to parliament. You have the powers to create some of those legislative, subsidiary legislation, including raising taxes. Raising taxes. So Parliament can only react to it right now because the minister has raised certain taxes. Now, what Parliament can do, in as far as, basically, there's a process for Parliament to follow if they want to shoot it down.
Let's be specific.
Let me just
so that we're on the same page, Farah. We are talking about the rise in fuel prices.
Yes.
The components in the fuel price include VAT,
Yes.
include excise duty,
Yes.
include now the others, the levies.
Yes.
Levies, the National Treasury could adjust. VAT, excise duty,
Yes.
they will not adjust.
They have been there from
They
the
have not
beginning.
adjusted.
Yes.
These were passed in Parliament.
Yes.
So there's nothing.
When were they passed in Parliament?
VAT duty, rising of VAT by 8%
Yes.
in the previous Parliament.
Absolutely.
Right? Not in
You're
the previous Parliament, in a couple of years.
No, in this current Parliament.
In this current Parliament,
yes,
but
yes.
The previous year.
Yes.
Excise duty was also passed in Parliament.
Yeah.
What was passed in Parliament has not been increased by Kuriatani. It is what was passed in Parliament.
Yes.
So the issue of saying that the current issue today with the rising fuel prices is a matter of the subsidiary legislation by a ministry that has power does not arise here. Because
Why is
the
it
fuel
more
has gone
expensive
up
today than it was 2 years ago, 1 year ago? Why was there no an outcry 1 year ago? Because you say the 8% raise on that, which is, in my opinion, unforgivable for members of parliament.
Yes.
Unforgivable.
Yes.
It never happens anywhere else in the world. You don't have a place where there is 24%, what do you call VAT, 16 plus raising it by 8% again. But be that as it may, why is there outcry now?
The percentage of tax,
Yes.
taxes and levies
Yes.
on fuel has been the same.
Yes.
With the introduction of VAT, it went. It
Yes.
has been the same since the introduction of
Yes,
VAT.
but the prices of
The landed cost
Yes.
is what has been fluctuating.
why? This is
And
the
that-
question you have to answer.
Now, those are the questions that we can ask elsewhere.
We have a
But they-
regulatory, we have an energy regulatory, what do you call, a commission?
Yes. And the landed cost is a market factor.
Not quite.
It is a market factor, Farah, because
Yes.
the landed cost here is determined by who has bid. Market players are bidding on
Yes.
who is going to bring fuel for the market.
Yes.
And it's open tender.
Yes.
So all the players in the oil marketing industry know how much fuel is going to cost,
Yes. Landed here.
landed here,
Yeah,
and this
yes.
is based on
Yes.
market and competition.
Yes.
It's sort of, we can just say, a free market.
Yes.
The issue here is the 58 bob that is going to
government.
for every liter of fuel.
To
58
government.
shillings going to
To
government.
government.
Members of parliament
Yes.
will complain about everything else
Yes.
and forget they passed excise duty.
Yes.
They passed VAT.
Yes.
They still have a responsibility to question on these other small levies.
Yes.
It doesn't mean that
Yes.
because Ukuriatani has brought in a levy, members of parliament cannot question that. They can't question that.
You're right. You're right. That can be
So
questioned.
now we
yes.
are on the same page.
Yes, now is when they have the capacity or the possibility of questioning. But for Ukuriatani to put this levy, he does not have to seek their approval.
Yes.
As a subsidiary legislation.
Yes.
You get
But
my
it's not new. That's what my point
not
is.
new. Let me-
because it's
let
not
me- let me
new,
explain to
They
you.
could have raised it last
Yes,
month.
yes, yes.
The month before.
Yeah, yeah.
They have never raised it. It's
Yes.
been there.
Yes.
Now is the time they wake up and suddenly realize that there's a railway levy.
All those levies are there. All those levies are there, and Parliament has a responsibility right now to interrogate that, and basically to bring the government to task. But having said that, you have to look at the bigger picture, the overall bigger picture.
Okay.
This country has borrowed massive amounts of money, which cannot be shown on the ground. Infrastructure is there, massive infrastructure is there. We have to respect that. But at what cost? From an overall debt of 17 billion US dollars, today we are talking about 90 billion US dollars in a short 8 years, 8.5 years, maybe less than 9 years. And for information, that now the extent to which this had to be mitigated by Parliament, I agree with you. When Parliament was told to go to raise the debt ceiling, it should have been more responsive. You don't allow the government to come up with a figure and you raise it overnight with over 100%, over 200% to what it was originally. And this is not the end of the road. That 9 trillion, government is borrowing today at the rate of 3.3 billion. It was in the media.
Yeah.
3.3 billion. That amounts to about $100 million a month.
Yeah.
Sorry, 100 billion Kenya
100
shillings
billion.
is the $1 billion.
Yeah.
Is $1 billion a month. If we only are short of that figure, the ceiling, reaching the ceiling, which the government does not have to go back to Parliament. It can continue borrowing until it reaches the ceiling of 9 trillion.
Yeah.
We're reaching that in about 2 months' time, I think, if not less. The government still has got to go back to Parliament again to seek that.
An extension.
No, raising further
to raise
the ceiling.
Yeah.
And you can bet
It'll happen.
it will happen.
So the question that we're asking, and that's a conversation that we're having this morning, is the legislature accountable to Kenyans? And that's the question we're asking. Our guest this morning is former Speaker of the National Assembly, Farah Maalim. We're live on KTN Home, on SpiceFM, and online.
There's a perspective that Mheshimiwa brought in when he actually was responding to what he had been asked. And I was thinking of the import of responsibility that we in the media bear in such situations, what civil society and the role that they play and the responsibility that they bear, and then Parliament. And as we were talking, I was thinking of how it is that even those of us in the media very quickly join what I'm referring to as a national tradition, kicking the can down the road. It is Parliament, it is this. You go to civil society, it is Parliament, it is the media. You go to Parliament, it is
The
this.
government.
Yes, exactly, it is the government. And yet, each of these entities have very, very distinct roles. And each of these entities have the capacity to hold each and every of these institutions to account. And yet, kicking the can down the road doesn't hold anybody to account. All it does is begins a song. This one blames, then the other one responds by also blaming. And yet, when I look at this issue, where perhaps, now this is me, where I join this fray in pointing fingers at Parliament is this. It's unfortunate, but when a leader is elected to represent their people in that hallowed house, sometimes I think, yes, it is true, we may expect more than is humanly possible, but we have expectations. And those expectations are met when there is a record of them having put their foot down on an issue. Then we say, you know something, Parliament put their foot down on this one.
Surely they can do it again.
We recall. And they said no. They returned this one and said, we're not going to deal with this. Or, as you say, those subsidiary legislations, when it came to their attention, they said, excuse me, we need to have a debate about this, and we have the power to throw this thing out. Now, when you see such things happening, then it becomes difficult to point a finger. But in the absence of it, the finger pointing becomes a popular sport.
Yeah, indeed. In every of those institutions, I must admit, I have been in and out of Parliament for about 30 years now. There is the lack of depth. The lack of depth in all that. In the media, massive lack of depth. Parliament as it is right now, people come from every sector. One was a teacher, one was an engineer, one was a lawyer. Very rarely you get lawyers in there. One was a media person. They are from all over. And people come in euphorias. For example, I don't know more than 90% of the members of Parliament today. I'm serious. Because there is nothing. We remember the times, even when I was a young man, you would still know everybody in Parliament.
Yep.
And we only had the Daily Nation, the Standard,
And the
no any
radio.
other paper, and the radio.
Yep.
And the radio. Even the TV didn't. The TV was a government owned, so it didn't say much. But then, as secondary school students in the 70s, we will rush immediately into the page of Parliament to listen to what the likes of Shekuku, Anyona, Onyonka. Anyona was much later. I was already an adult.
Yes.
But the early days, there were those people who were there and literally doing a good job. Plus the cabinet ministers who were there. Caliph, there was a guy who was called Caliph, who was an assistant minister. The late, what do you call, Serenay. The late Muthui, Chelagat Muthui,
Yes.
and all those people. But today, we were able to follow some of these things as young as in Form 1, even in Standard 7. The first thing that I was in a boarding school, national boarding school, in the morning is the radio is on. We used to have those small transistors, and what they Jana Bungeni, or something like that, and then you listen to that.
So there was depth.
There was depth.
Depth of debate.
There was
depth of
interrogation
understanding.
at L levels when somebody says, and then people used to write to the media. And Kalastos Juma, the renowned late scientist, and I was really, really saddened by his death. I knew him when he had left his A levels, and was a contributor to the media, contributor to the nation, the ordinary articles to the nation. And he made a lot of sense.
So how did that
And somebody picked him out and gave him what they call a scholarship outside, progressively until he became the renowned professor of environment, is it?
Yes.
And these were the kind of things that we had. Today, that's not there.
So the depth.
The media is not there. The media is sensation. Oh, you say this and this, so and so say. He says, you say, she say, and nothing much more than that.
So here we are asking you today
Yes.
that the depth. Okay, of course I'm going to camp here.
Absolutely.
The depth that is missing from Parliament now, from what you're saying,
It's massive.
has become shallow. A shallow understanding
There
of
is
what ought to be done
absolutely
in
no
terms
depth,
of
yes.
legislation.
Yes,
A
yes.
shallow understanding in terms of what needs to happen for representation.
yeah.
A shallow understanding and practice of what needs to be happening for oversight.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
then begs a very maybe simple question, is that why then do we have a legislature in place
Let me
who does
exp-
not
yes.
understand what is supposed to be happening?
I agree with you. Let me tell you one thing. Everybody who has to have the mandate of another body to maintain the relevance is playing to that body for approval. A member of parliament is playing to the constituents for approval. A government is playing to those members of parliament for approval, because members of parliament can bring down a government. Uhuru's government and Ruto's government today, if parliament decides they send them home, they can send them home. And then above all, there is the media and the scholarly constituency. Since when did you see some of these very powerful debates that you see in the rest of the world on issues being undertaken, firmly and owned by scholars who are authorities on their different fields and who are literally asking questions and telling the country we are wrong? You are depending on a government or a legislature that is unable to deliver. But these are the issues. What are the kind of scholars we have in the country? 90% of them are hired guns for anybody who has the capacity to pay. I'm telling you.
Let me ask this question.
And let me just finish this bit.
Please go ahead, Mheshimiwa.
The other are hell-bent on very parochial, ethnic, and other constituencies where they will support. For example, without the many, many intellectuals, brilliant intellectuals, people of substance from the mountain region who will not come out and castigate what the government of Uhuru is doing. Similarly, you have a similar situation in Kalenjin Rift Valley. You get my point.
Similar situation in Luo Nyanza.
Luo Nyanza is a religion,
Cumberland.
basically, literally a religion.
Yes.
You know what I mean? I mean, I don't want to mention names, but some of my brilliant friends and who are legal scholars,
They're quiet.
of course,
They're
they can
silent.
only support Raila. They cannot do anything else. And so you see, genuine, honest, patriotic, scholarly outputs and inputs are not there. It's all parochial.
What
it's
is
all
the cause of
self-centered.
this?
I want to tell you. Look at, for example, the who is who in the people who are trying to put something together for William Ruto. Many of them, we were together in NASA. My good old friend. And I'm unable even to live with it. And it still remains a very close friend of mine, David Ndii. Where is David Ndii now?
It's in the Hustler Nation.
He's in the Hustler Nation.
Is he? Is he?
And I hear many others.
speaks
I don't
strongly
want,
about
I
the
don't want to
Hustler
mention other names, but there are many other people who are authorities in their own rights, who are professors, who you'll be told are in this camp or that camp. So that genuine, patriotic, non-partisan, only partisan to substance. You cannot be wholly non-partisan. You must be partial to substance and partisan to substance.
So has the legislature been held?
Not there. And then you have a legislature that, I told you, 95% of them, actually 90% is an overstatement. Over 95% of them, I don't even know them by names.
So has the legislature then been held captive by personal ambition as opposed to people representation?
Yeah, you don't plant maize and expect to harvest beans.
So is that a yes?
What
or?
did we do as masses? And then, look, the blame does not end there. The blame goes to the masses. How do the masses end up electing their representatives?
Actually, we've had this debate, Mheshimiwa.
It says, let me just finish one bit.
Yes.
They say a society gets the leadership it deserves. If you have a corrupt, crooked, and rotten society like we have in Kenya, I'm sorry to say this, then of course they will get that kind of a leadership.
Mheshimiwa.
At the end of the day, look at the number of graduates, look at the number of people who have substance who just come in to support somebody, and you know, with the media these days and the social media and everything else. Look at those guys. All those guys have got degrees. These young people have degrees. But they don't care about substance. They don't care. It's not like the early days ourselves when you were even in secondary school, in upper secondary school, you would read about Mao Zedong, you read about Chu Enlai, Lim Piao, Stalin, you read the works of what you call Karl Marx and the rest of it. And you think you can bring a solution to Africa.
Strong leaders and
Strong,
characters.
strong political
However,
convictions and social convictions.
City
And
has
then
been meaning to ask
think,
you a question for a while. He's itching with this.
I'm sorry.
I'm listening because the sort of fodder literature that Mheshimiwa read is the same fodder I read. I'm surprised he didn't mention Frantz Fanon, the wretched of the earth.
Absolutely, the wretched of the earth, yeah.
That was fundamental reading.
Rodney.
Yes, exactly.
Walter Rodney.
Fundamental reading. Now, Mheshimiwa here was one of the most outspoken individuals in his time about the marginalization of the Somali community. He has spoken about it, and I'm certain in the process of speaking, he has been called many names, okay, and has been labeled as such. When I used to read about him, I took it that this is a man who actually takes his job seriously.
Thank you.
He has been elected and he's saying, no. I represent people and I must say what I know and what I see. Now, the unfortunate thing is this. It's a question that is difficult to answer, but yet it must be asked. What happened to the current leaders? Now, the debate about public leaders, who's to blame, leave blame aside. You cannot run away from the power of influence and leadership.
Absolutely.
And MPs represent a body of people who cannot be referred to anything other than leaders. Now, many of them don't live up to the mark and to the title and to the name of leader.
But they enjoy the perks.
But yes, and actually they are. And unfortunately, many people see them as such. In Mheshimiwa's time, being a member of parliament was not a get-rich-quick scheme. In fact, the salary was paltry.
It wasn't.
10,000 when I first
No,
came
it
into
wasn't.
Parliament.
It wasn't.
Yeah.
It wasn't. They didn't earn much money. In fact, Waheshimiwa were servants of the people almost literally. Now, we have a parliament that is actually well-to-do. These fellows have a good time. They have this perk, under that perk, under the other perk, under this perk. And how has that come about? So,
When I came first into Parliament, the salary was 10,000 shillings. The allowances, when you add them cumulatively,
This was 92.
92, December 92, so effectively 93. When you put all the allowances together, the sitting allowance, it was 39,000 shillings. And coming from the farthest end, the mileage was 8,000 per week.
Okay.
So it's about 32,000 plus 39,000. So 71,000 is all that a member of parliament from the farthest end would make. The ones from around here were making nothing other than the 39,000 shillings, so probably another 3,000. You see, because 8,000 for the mileage from here all the way to Lagdera is almost 1,000 kilometers, was 8,000.
and the road network was horrible.
The whole
almost
road network
almost
was
non-existent.
horrible. And let me tell you one thing. Very few of us had cars, and those ones who came from business. And many of them were very old jalopies, small pickups, small things that sometimes you'll have to call a mechanic into Parliament grounds there to repair for
Come and
you.
sort it out. By the time
Prepare
you were
for
leaving
you.
Parliament,
Yes.
you left in the 9th Parliament? Or was it the
No,
8th?
in the 10th.
eighth.
I was there
The
in the
10th
10th,
in the
yeah.
10th Parliament.
Yes.
So by the time you were leaving, what was the salary of a member of Parliament?
Oh my God. Oh, salary and allowances were. The allowances, the ones who don't go far, would earn 360,000 those days, I remember.
Yeah.
As a standard amount that they were getting per week.
Okay.
No, sorry, per month.
Per month.
That comes to about 100,000 shillings. It has since increased. Those ones who are coming from far, distant, like ourselves.
Yeah.
At that time, I was making about 600,000 only in mileage.
On mileage claim was only.
Per month.
So it was during
And
your
the
generation.
salary was, when you put all that together, plus the deductions, an MP was making about, I was a deputy speaker, so mine was definitely higher than that, but about 700,000-800,000.
So the point here,
So on average,
during your generation
Yes.
in Parliament,
Yes.
the remuneration for members of Parliament had shot up tremendously.
Yes.
In your years.
Yes.
All right.
Yes.
So we can say that during this time,
Yes.
members of Parliament got to increase their salary significantly. Members of Parliament also got to make
independence
sure
of Parliament.
they brought in the independence
The
of
most
Parliament.
important thing was the independence of Parliament.
Delinking your calendar from that of the
Absolutely.
executive.
Before we were part of the office of the president,
Yes.
salaries were paid from there, staff were
There was a Parliamentary Service Commission.
Basically,
All these things had happened.
Yes.
That shows me that there was, if we look at the 60s, the 70s, the 80s,
Yes.
the 90s, and the first decade of the 2000s,
Yes.
that Parliament,
exponentially.
that shows that there was a lot of understanding
Yes.
of the job of
Yes.
parliamentarians. That's
Yes.
just 2 parliaments ago.
Yes.
So we can't really say that this parliament, 7 years later, can have lost understanding of the job of parliamentarians.
Actually, they have.
To begin with, let me explain to you.
I think they understand
Let
the
me-
job more. It's just that they choose not to do the job, probably.
Let me explain to you one thing you need to know. Not less than 60% of the members of parliament were not elected by the people.
Why do you say this?
They were rigged. There were no elections in Northeastern Province. And I know of many other places where the popular choice of the people never made it. Never made it. So one thing is you have people who have come in through the back door. And there is a lot of rigging. There's hell of a lot of rigging. And the standard procedure was, you can do what you want, you can vote for whoever you want, but I will, like in my case, they used to say that we will cross the bridge with the nomination certificate. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Wewe fanya vile unataka Farah, get all that.
But who has the
You'll
certificate
defeat
is
me.
what matters.
Yeah, like in mimi nitakuwa na certificate. And it happened. It happened a number of times. It happened many times to me. So the problem we have is, to begin with, one, these are people who were selected.
So they're not accountable to the people. The people did not pick them, choose them anyway.
They don't care.
So who are they
And
accountable
all they
to?
care about now is actually worse right now, because they've come out, they've come into parliament. The country has a a very interesting tradition. 85%, 90% of them don't come back again. And very few people would not come back and then come back at that time, or come back a fourth time, or come back other times. Usually those are the ones who had been rigged out initially. So the people are still, they're close to the people. You get my point? So they know that they're not coming back. So it's like make hay while the sun shines. So then they will steal the CDF. There's always a certain amount of money which is a constituency-based one, is Kera, I think, and give problem to those authorities to make sure that they give it to their own brothers and cousins and the rest of them, so that cronies, it comes back to them again. And basically, they are there also all the time, whatever nation they want to call themselves, call them Hasra Nation or Keleweki or everything. Again, going back and making money from those people who are, you know what I mean? And that's because you ask yourself one question: how does somebody who did not have nothing have the capacity to bankroll things in the billions? You see what I mean? And then, is it rocket science? You say it's rocket science to understand that this money was stolen.
Mheshimiwa, there's something that has to be asked here. You see, whenever we point fingers at Parliament, it is not without reason or without evidence.
I know.
We don't focus on their lifestyles or on what they purportedly make. We focus on what we consider to be their function.
Yeah.
See, like now, what has brought about this debate are these rising costs that are born out of taxes. And you're thinking, but we have a budget-making Parliament, for heaven's sake. An independent institution. You know, there's something that Mheshimiwa said that actually has opened my eyes. If there is evidence to support what he has said, that many of these people were not elected, then indeed it explains many things, because they have no business listening to what the
money.
money.
They know they're not coming back, because over 90% of them don't come back.
They know they're not coming back.
Yes.
So this motion is going to Parliament today. There's a notice of motion to discuss this rising cost of fuel and rising cost of living. What impact is that likely to have? It's a motion.
Well, it's a private member's motion.
Yep.
It's not a bill. It's not a motion of censure. You see what I mean?
Yep.
It's a private member's motion is just a debate, the way you have
a proposal.
debate.
It's a conversation.
It's a conversation. It's a conversation.
Even if it's bearing any fruit.
Yes. Yeah. Even if you have the motion saying A, B, C, D, the government must do this, and then you say as many of that say aye, and everybody says aye, it still has no.
Meaning, once you say
no authority.
It is finished.
It has absolutely no authority.
It is not binding.
It's not
on
binding.
the executive to
Absolutely.
do anything about it.
Absolutely.
What would it take, for example? I mean, we're just looking at this now. You know, everybody's up in arms. There's this motion that's going before the House today. What would it take to get some kind of impact in something like this? Because the hope of the people, because I'm just going to go back there, the hope of the people often
gonna be a reversal.
is that there would be a reversal, or there would be something that would kind of push in the direction of this being reversed. What would it take for such a thing to happen?
Well, under normal circumstances, your Parliament should be able to tell the executive, listen, reverse this immediately. You fail to do that. In a Westminster system, we will seek a motion of no confidence in the government.
Yes.
Or, yeah.
Basically, use the tools at your disposal.
Absolutely.
To make the government.
If the government is insensitive.
To make the government do what it ought to do.
Yeah.
Farah Maalim, former Deputy Speaker of the National Assembly, is with us in the House. He's a former MP. Initially, it was Lagdera. Then that constituency now has
Still
a different
Lagdera.
name.
No, it's split into two. I'm
Yes.
going for the DAB now.
For the DAB now.
Yes.
He wants to be the next MP for the DAB constituency.
Yes.
Okay.